It's Monday, March 10th, 2025. We are in the Ides of March, and that also means it's time for the Knee Jerks podcast, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno, Nick, and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster. Joining me, as always, are my partners in crime. First off is our West Coast correspondent, and that would be Nick Milanovich. Mr. Wizard, how's things?
Well, things are going pretty well over here. Had some pretty nice weather, relaxing. I did get to watch some Pistons games, so that's always good.
That's right. They've been on the West Coast for the past week, and we just won't talk about car registrations. Nick's kind of put that as a sore spot with him. That might be his jerk of the week, actually. So, all right, and also, excuse me, I'm just getting over COVID, people. So pardon me if I cough. And of course, joining me as always is the man knows a lot of things about a lot of things. He's a fellow RVer like myself. And we're just both dying for some nice weather here in Michigan, which we're finally starting to get. And that is Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds Substack. Greg, how's things?
Well, Al, the difference is that my RV actually hits the road and moves.
Yeah, mine doesn't go anywhere.
I don't know if we RV the same way, but we do both have them.
Yes.
I am Greg Eno from my Out of Bounds Substack, GregEno.substack.com. Please read me there. I come into your inbox every Monday, as I did today, as we record this on Monday the 10th. Piece on Tom Gores, but not so much on Tom Gores as much as it is about how we can let's forget about Tom Gores right now and focus on the Pistons and their prospects of the playoffs and all the good news that's happening with them. No guest tonight. But in 2 weeks from tonight, we will be joined by a good friend of the Knee Jerks, Chris Creighton.
Yes.
Head football coach at Eastern Michigan University, who will join us in a couple of tough seasons in Ypsilanti. We got to talk about that, and kudos to Coach for not ducking that. He'll come on and take the slings and arrows from us 2 weeks from tonight, the 24th. Looking forward to that. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow me, or at the Knee Jerks, follow me on Twitter or X at Greg Eno. Also, I'm on Blue Sky as well. Al mentioned on Twitch. We're now on Twitch. I think this is the second or third show we've joined on Twitch. So that's good stuff. We have, I think we're going to hit all four sports tonight, all four teams tonight, Al, because we were not with you a couple weeks ago. So we're back now with a month's worth of stuff to talk about. But before we get to any of that stuff that Al's got on the plate, we're going to play a little game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al and Nick a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if one of those two gentlemen can correctly guess this person within the first two clues, they will receive the home version of the Knee Jerks, the home version.
The home version.
The home version.
Ah.
So
excuse me.
Home version of the Knee Jerks, so you can play it in your home. This person, this is kind of an unusual one. This person, first of all, I will say, is a female. She was born on this date in 1961, and she never played sports, albeit she was a track star in college, but is very familiar to TV viewers across the country as one of the longest tenured sideline reporters in television sports, particularly the NFL.
The longest tenured.
One of them for sure. Been around for over 30 years.
Oh.
I can only think of one, but I don't think she's that old.
Well, guess her.
Erin Andrews.
Nope, she's not that old. And Erin would slap you across the face if she.
I know. That's why I want to say it. You made me say it.
If you made her 64 years old, she would track you down and beat you to death. No, it's not Erin Andrews.
God. Yeah. Right now, none's coming to mind. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or actually, I can actually see the faces of some. I just can't remember the names.
Okay. Fair enough.
You and I suffer from CSS or CRS. Can't remember shit.
Yeah.
CSS can't see shit.
Okay, well,
all right.
But you know what? I have faith in you guys. I think you'll get it in the next clue. I really do.
You have more faith than I have.
Yeah, me too. Like
Yeah.
I'm with him. Like I can remember maybe a face, but like
Yeah.
name, like yeah.
All right. Okay. With that, let's move on to the topics du jour. Obviously, there's been a lot going on since we haven't been on in a month. And obviously, the free agency in the NFL started today. Lions made a splash signing, a surprising one, honestly. It actually looks like a pretty good one. Tigers are in spring training. Not too much going on there, but since we last talked, there has been the Bregman stuff. At least touch on what's going on there. The Pistons are playing. Excuse me. Pardon me. Good Lord. The Pistons are playing very well, coming off a 2-2 road trip on the West Coast. A trip they could have went 4-0 on, except for some dumb basketball. But again, they're a young team, and sometimes it really shows. But I think the most hotly debated topic as of late in the Detroit area with the sports fans has been the Detroit Red Wings in the direction of the team and what happened at the trade deadline. And the Ides of March have hit, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction of the show. And as usual, for the third straight year, it's hit the Red Wings hard again. Entering tonight's game, I believe they're in Ottawa tonight. And good things always happen in Ottawa, don't they, as we've seen in the past. The Wings have lost 5 straight games. They have fallen out of a wild card spot. They have 66 points right now. The way it looks to make the playoffs in a wild card, they're going to leave at least 95, 96 points. At least 95. There's only 19 games left to play, guys. And they have the hardest strength of schedule of any playoff contender. So, with the playoffs looking like a pipe dream, Steve Yzerman made one trade deadline deal. He sent Joe Veleno to the Blackhawks for 33-year-old, good Lord, 33-year-old former Red Wing goalie Peter Mrazek, and 35-year-old fourth-line center Craig Smith. And of course, that the debate started once again in this town between the rose-colored glass-wearing Yzerman lovers and people who are starting to lose patience with what's going on with the Red Wings. I know we had this discussion via text, and I think most of the three of us are probably leaning on we're running out of patience with what's going on here. So we'll get into a little bit about the trade, but I'll start with you, Greg. The new coach bump looks like it's finally leveled off. The Wings did have those 2 7-game winning streaks, but now they're playing much like they did when when Derek Lalonde was still coach. The 5-on-5 offense is horrible. Penalty kill is rough. They're getting by when they do win on the power play. That's essentially their offense at this point. The 2 players, goddamn, pardon me. The 2 players who went to the Four Nations, Raymond and Larkin, have not played well at all since the break. And actually, the break really was that really hurt the Red Wings. They were on a roll, come back from the break. They've lost 4 since the Four Nations, 5 in a row. So, Greg, what the hell's going on with the Red Wings right now? It's they are looking like a team that, much like last year, it's like deja vu all over again.
And the year before that,
exactly.
You mentioned Ottawa a few seconds ago, and that was where the
2 years ago,
that's where it happened 2 years ago. That was the start of the collapse 2 years ago. Last year, and I was telling you guys on chat, text, that it seems like it happens almost like on schedule. The last week of February, first week of March, they go into the tank. I don't. The only thing I can come up with about that is that they just, they're a roster, I guess, that just isn't good enough for 82 games. Maybe they're good enough for 55 or 60, and then it catches up to them. I can't think of any other. Maybe it's an Occam's razor thing. The answer is right there. The simplest explanation is the best. They're just not good enough. Yeah. And yes, you're right. They had 2 7-game winning streaks. There was a coaching change bump for sure with Todd McClellan. We all wanted to think that it was more than that it was Todd somehow getting more out of this roster than what was really there, and he did for a little bit. Yeah. But I think and the Four Nations thing, I go back and forth on that. Some of me wants to blame it on that. Yeah. And say, look, they had all this momentum, and then everybody took off for like almost 2 weeks, and then they came back. But then I thought, wait a minute now. If you're good, you're good. If you're good, you're good. If you take 2 weeks off, you should still be good. Yeah. Come back. So maybe teams that aren't very good, like the Red Wings, or when I say aren't very good, aren't good enough to really do much more than just flirt with the playoff spot. Maybe that's what these teams do, is come back from breaks like that and then not be able to sustain. If these were the Stanley Cup contending Red Wings teams that we've seen in the past, they would let a 2-week Four Nations break bother them. They would, they would come back out and play. They might have a little bit of rust, but they quickly regain their senses. And I don't know. So I'm not sure whether to even buy into the whole Four Nations thing necessarily. So I just think it just boils down to they're just not good enough. And they had some bumps there, some winning streaks with McClellan. They seemed to be believing in themselves. Their power play was on fire. They had gotten a little better on the PK. Now everything at once is going south. All facets. If this was football, it'd be offense, defense, and special teams are all going south at the same time, and they've reverted back to their Derek Lalonde days. It looks a lot like the team that played for Lalonde, and people have said they're soft both physically and mentally. That's been bandied about for a while now, that they're a soft team. Certainly soft physically, that's for sure. That there's something missing, an intangible in the dressing room that nobody can really put their finger on. But again, I think these are all, everybody has an explanation, but it just might be as simple as they're not good enough. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, where you fall on all this is, I know you've been pretty, you've been fairly on the, you've been on the, pardon. Go ahead, Nick. I got a cough.
Well. Okay. Not a problem. So for me, I think it's the roster itself, and which is, I think, consistent with what Greg is saying with just not being good enough. But I think there's something more than that. There's something really off about this roster. It's like they play with no motivation. They did this in the fall when Lalonde was still there. We had a conversation with Bob, also Bob Page, a few weeks ago. Bob was saying these guys are supposed to be professionals, no matter who the coach is, and they're supposed to be competing and playing to win. And I think he's right, but this team kind of doesn't. And it just they may go up 2 goals on their opponent, but it seems like it's by dumb luck, and then just fall apart afterwards. They can't play a 60-minute game. A few of these losses recently were, who was the last team they played? I can't remember who they were, but they were up 2-0 on them, and then all of a sudden, Washington. It was Washington. Yeah. And they crumbled, I think, gave up 4 goals in the fourth. Sorry, in the third. In the third period.
Right.
So, but the team is soft. They look like they're uninspired. And it was the same last year. And you would think maybe it's the coach. Maybe he doesn't have got this guys fired up. There was the bump with McClellan, but he's not firing up this team either. Their veterans are kind of meh, like the free agents that Yzerman brought in over the last couple of years. It kind of stunk, actually.
Yeah.
Comfer wasn't good. Tarasenko is kind of useless. The Brinkett is hot and cold. Kane is a good stick handler, but not a leader. He doesn't get fired up to compete. And that's what happened last year. We talked about this a few times. And so I don't know. It's just this roster is kind of blah. And still kind of boring. We said this too. It's like, how the hell do you have a boring hockey team? But you could say that about baseball. Baseball can be really boring. Yeah. But hockey,
if you look at the other teams in town that are doing well, and I would even put the Tigers in this category to a degree, but especially the Lions and the Pistons. There is a tangible personality that these teams have. I used to not be all that big of a believer in things like grit and stuff like that. But what I've seen with the Lions turn around and what I've seen with the Pistons turn around, and this speaks to Nick's point about veterans, You saw what the Pistons are doing now when they bring in really established good veterans, Tobias Harris, Hardaway Jr., Beasley. Now that sneaky move that they with Schroeder, which is really a crazy like a fox move that Langdon pulled off. And you look at their attitude and how they love playing for JB, and there's I know they're different sports, I get it, but they're just. And then you look at the Lions, and you look at that culture, and you look at Campbell and how much the players love him, and the type of people they bring in, and the grit, to use an oft-used word with the Lions, grit, and the I don't know. There's just something that those teams have in contrast to what Nick was saying about the Red Wings being boring and not really having much of a personality. And I think if you look at the other teams in town, you compare them to the Red Wings, that's what the Red Wings need. And that's, unfortunately, that's not easy to just get. And it's not easy to describe either. It's not as simple as saying, well, here are the free agents. These are the guys they need to sign. It's not that simple. But I think it's both apparent what they need, but yet difficult to find what they need, if that makes any sense. In terms of who do they go to get to correct that. It just seems like right now they're just kind of waiting for these young kids that we keep hearing about down in the minors to come up and see what they've got. But so far the bag has been a little mixed on these kids who've come up. Some of them have been okay, and some of them have not been so okay. But that's to be expected. Why? When you're always relying on young kids, that's what you get. You get a mixed bag. That's why a farm system alone can't do it. And where Yzerman has fallen short, let's be honest now, it's been just the way that Troy Weaver fell short with and where Bob Quinn fell short, which was not so much the drafting part. Drafting part's been okay. It's been the free agency, the roster building aside from that. That's where Steve Yzerman has fallen short, just like the other guys I mentioned. That's fair to say. Even a Yzerman supporter would have to admit, I would think, that's where he has fallen short, is in the roster building outside of the drafting and scouting. And that's what I said about the Tigers. You can't win on kids alone. You got to bring in vets. And the Pistons did that. And look where they are now. Now, I didn't think they'd be this good, necessarily, the Pistons. I knew they'd be better. But my gosh, those veterans they brought in have just, not only are they playing well, but they've injected something into that team that has been long lacking. And
Tobias Harris is a great example. Tobias Harris.
Yeah.
Tobias Harris. Exactly. He put the team on his back at times last night, Yeah. But it's funny, when you bring up the young players, who one of those young players was? Joe Valeno.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that. I was actually having a conversation with somebody else about that earlier today. The thing different, though, about Langdon's the veterans Langdon brought in versus the ones Weaver was bringing in. Weaver brought in Bogey, Alex Burks. I don't know if you would consider Kevin Knox a veteran of any kind. They fell flat. Bogey was hurt all the time, so was Burks. They weren't playing much. Bogey wouldn't know defense if it hit him in the head. But these guys are playing different. So you got to pick the right veterans. Like I was saying, Comfort has been a dud, and they got him. I think on 4 years. He's got 2 more years of him.
Yep.
Tarasenko has just sucked. I don't think he's
he's got another year left on his deal.
Yeah, and the Brinket is like hot and cold. Although he came in the trade, but and Kane also hot and cold, if you ask me. But and a few of these others, it's just kind of it's just the veterans. I think Yzerman did the right thing to supplement the young guys with veterans. I just think the veterans he brought in just did not do well. It doesn't work with this mix for whatever reason.
It's the proverbial roster construction, which was the same issue the Pistons had. And they like the goaltending. Like they got 3 goaltenders on the roster, and they're going to keep all 3 guys for the remainder of the year. It looks like, And just like the old saying goes, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. I think with the Wings, if you have three goalies, do you really have a starting goalie or a goalie period? Apparently not, because, pardon me, between the Lion, Talbot, and now and Mrazek, yeah, essentially they have three backups. And apparently, even Yzerman mentioned this in the presser, that he's hoping that maybe Mrazek will get hot. And what do they say about hope? Hope is not a plan. But that's essentially what the Wings have come down to, is that they're hoping Mrazek can step up his game and maybe have his best year. He's been bad for like 3 or 4 years at this point. I mean, that save percentage of .890 this year, that's awful. And then Craig Smith, decent player, but he's 35 years old. He's a rental. He's on a 1-year deal as it is. He might give you a couple goals, might give you a little more grit on the fourth line, but if you're improving your fourth line, I mean, what difference is that going to make in the big scheme of things? Your fourth freaking line. I mean, this again, it comes down to roster construction, guys, and it honestly isn't making that much sense. Oh, and let alone with the goalie stuff, they got rid of Husso, but replaced him with another Husso and Mrazek. I mean, I just don't get this roster construction stuff at all, and it's become very frustrating with the Red Wings. In that, I'll put it this way: Yzerman is building this team like he's not getting any pressure at all from the front office, and not getting any pressure from the media or from the fans to maybe. I don't want to say kickstart to rebuild, but at least show a little more urgency, if you know what I'm saying. And isn't the point of having a prospect pool, which supposedly they have a fairly deep one, is to use that prospect pool to get better players, trade them? And yet Yzerman is slow playing to the point where it feels like he's fucking sandbagging.
Well, you know what?
Actually, he was doing a press conference after the trade deadline, and I was like listening to part of that. And it sounded like he was very willing to trade, like say, draft picks or prospects for. He wouldn't do it for a rental.
Yeah, he wanted a term. In other words, yeah.
Well, it makes sense for term. Like what are the Wings going for? They're going to try and make the playoffs and bow out in the first round. Mm-hmm. So what are they really going for? This is for. I would say for a team that's really trying to push into the playoffs, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But it feels like I don't know how to quite to put this, but it feels like Yzerman's in this sort of limbo style state. He doesn't have enough of the assets, and they're not good enough to bother trading young guys for proven talent.
Yeah,
like really good players, not just some. Third, fourth line center.
Yeah.
But, and his draft picks, a couple of them are hitting. But honestly, sometimes, and I'll ask you guys this because I'm not sure what the answer is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it feels like he's overcooking the prospects in the minors.
You know what?
That's been going on for decades with this organization.
Right. I was just going to comment about that. When the Red Wings were really good, they did exactly that, but they could afford to do that because they were very good at the NHL level. They had a lot of established, in some cases, Hall of Fame players up and down the lineup. So it made sense in a way that those young players would overcook, if you will, or get overripe down in the minors. It's true. Now that's not the case. The thing that, by the way, Al, for folks who may think, oh, .890 save percentage, that sounds okay. It's 80. Mm-hmm. That means that every 100 shots you're facing, 11 go in. And when you figure that I think it's about 33 shots a game or so, you're giving up almost 4 goals a game at .890. Okay, so just let that sink in for a second. But the thing about, back to what Nick was saying.
Yeah.
I think part of my frustration, I can only speak for myself, part of my frustration about this whole thing is that this mindset, you mentioned sandbagging, this mindset of I'm only going to show urgency. I won't show urgency until I think we're going to win the Stanley Cup. It's almost like I don't want to just make I don't know how many times he said I don't want to just make the playoffs. I want it to be sustainable. Okay, I'll buy that to a degree. But there's got to come a time where you got to give these kids like Raymond, Sider, and I'll throw Larkin in there. He's not a kid, but Larkin, Raymond, Sider, those kind of that group of people. They've got to get some playoff experience. They got to get in. They got to get. And isn't the NHL kind of renowned for teams getting into the tournament and making noise? How many times have we seen that happen? Florida Panthers a couple of years ago. Remember that thing where they barely made the playoffs and went all the way to. Didn't they go all the way to the finals? Or I think they went all the way to the finals that year. I think it was 2023 when they upset the Bruins in the first round and then just kept going. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that if the Red Wings made the playoffs, they would do that. But where does making the playoffs, it's almost like making the playoffs is like taboo. Oh, I don't want to make the playoffs. I'm not going to do anything until I'm comfortable that we have a team that can reach the Stanley Cup Finals. It's almost like it's almost the mindset. Like, well, Steve, wait a minute now. Why don't you try? How about let's try this one year. Try getting in. And see what happens. And okay, if you get blown out in 4 straight, okay. I can guarantee you if the Red Wings made the playoffs, got blown out 4 straight, there'd be some disappointment. But the fans will not hang him in effigy if they do that. They are so thirsty for playoff hockey in this town that even if it was a 4-game sweep, I can guarantee you most of the fans would say, well, you know what? They got some experience. Good for them. Now they know what it's like. And these kids have never had that. Siders and Raymond are in their 4th year. Larkin's only made the playoffs once. That was way back when he was 19 years old. Okay, that doesn't count as far as I'm concerned. He was like probably 3rd or 4th liner back then. So, at what point does making, and he should know that. And that's what makes me frustrated as well. Steve should know that. He was when he played, he got some playoff experience when he was a younger player that didn't go very well because they were still not quite good enough. But they made some playoffs when he was a young player in his early 20s. The Red Wings would make the playoffs. But the year they went to the conference finals against Edmonton in '87, he was 22. He's 22. So why doesn't he understand how important that is as a player, as a young player, to be in the playoffs? And I don't care what the result is in the playoffs. At what point does making the playoffs become a priority? Where you're willing to do a little bit, and Nick mentioned being stuck in neutral, whatever the terminology used, limbo. At what point do you snap out of that? It's a slow roll. It's moving at glacial speed, and it's got people angry.
It's actually I don't want to watch any of their games this year.
He's stubborn. He's stubborn. You can say all you want about, well, he's got a plan and he's meticulous and he's patient. I think he's stubborn. I really do. I think he's stubborn. And I
possibly could be. Like, it's really every single year it's kind of the same story when you hear about it. Like,
and they always pull this losing right when the trade deadline's about to happen. So you never know what you think that he might do something that's kind of big, lack of a better word, but then they go to the tank right around the trading deadline, which muddies the waters because now you don't know, should he go for it, should he not? If the trade deadline was a month ago before the Four Nations, he probably would have done something a little bit more flamboyant. But I just think he's stubborn. I think he's stubborn. And Al, you mentioned that he's operating as if he doesn't have any pressure. He doesn't have any pressure.
Right.
Keith gave, I don't know how many times Keith Gave has told us, don't hold your breath waiting for the Illiches to fire Steve Yzerman. It's not going to happen. So yeah, if I had that kind of job security in professional sports of all things, which is the last place you would expect to have job security is in professional sports. If I had that kind of job security, I'd slow my roll too if I wanted to. Yeah. I think he's stubborn. I'm not suggesting he doesn't know what he's doing, but I think he's just stubborn. He doesn't want to do anything he's just stuck in his ways. And we'll see if it pays off, but so far it hasn't.
Well, we have to bring up Jake Wallman for what that because of what happened. Well, obviously we talked about this before the season started. When Yzerman, that when Yzerman traded him to San Jose and got I think, cap space in return and he had to throw in a second round pick to supposedly get rid of him. Even though there was talk from other GMs that they didn't even know he was on the market and they would have been interested. And then it turned out at this latest trade deadline, San Jose flipped Wallman to Edmonton for a first-round draft pick, a protected first-round draft pick, but a first-round draft pick all the same. So essentially, San Jose turned nothing into a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and 6 months of Jake Wallman, while the Red Wings gave away a valuable asset to get rid of their a top 4 defenseman who is worth a first-round pick to a different team. If that isn't bundling your asset management, if another GM had done that in this town, guys, people would be wanting to run him out of town on a rail right now. But since it's Steve Yzerman, all I'm hearing was, well, we make mistakes. He screwed up that one, but it happens. I'm like, if Bob Quinn had done that, they would have had the pitchforks and torches out, for Christ's sake. Or Randy Smith, or Al Avila, or Martin Mayhew, or whoever. But it's Saint Steve. So, he just made a mistake. He screwed up. Or they throw out, well, there's rumors he was a locker room cancer. There's nothing, but that's all it is rumors. There's been nothing ever reported about Wallman had issues in the locker room with other teams or if they're other teammates or whatever. It was an absolute flareable offense by Steve Yzerman, and yet he is just getting, well, it happens. And that is what I find frustrating with this organization right now, and the fan base and the media for that point. Could you see if that had happened in New York City? And in the GM of, say, the Rangers, that would happen with him? Oh, no, there would be front page fucking headlines. In Detroit, it's like, well, he made a mistake. And that is so damn frustrating that his ass isn't being held to the fire over asinine bungles like that.
Their last offseason had just a bunch of weird moves. Mm-hmm. More so than even like what you might have thought about coming from Yzerman, that one being one of the bigger ones. And then letting Gostisbehere go. And
yes. And they miss him badly out of their offense.
Oh, God. And it just doesn't make any sense. Like, a lot of the moves he made last offseason in particular made no sense.
Yeah.
And it certainly didn't make him better. It was kind of weird, I think, because Yzerman thought the team was a playoff team, even with whatever this roster is now.
Yeah.
They're not. They're not at all. Probably 2/3 or 3/4 of this season, other than a couple stretches early on when McClellan first took over, they stunk. They've been terrible the whole time. This roster stinks. It does not.
They're not fun to watch. I mean, they're not fun.
No, they're boring.
They're in no man's land again, and that's the worst place to be. Right. They're not bad enough to where it's worth tanking or they're going to get a decent draft pick, and they're not good enough to make the playoffs or, be anything more than first-round fodder and be knocked out in 4 games. Yeah, and they probably won't even make the playoffs. And that is no place to be because they're going to be stuck picking like a 13th or 14th in the draft, and they won't make the playoffs. They're fucked. Pardon my French.
Well, and even with those, at that, what do you call it? At that number in the, what do you call it, the draft?
Yeah.
They're not going to get anybody that's going to help them anytime soon anyway.
Right.
So unless you pick like the first 2 or 3, maybe 5 guys, they're not going to see the NHL for a little while.
Yeah.
It's very rare that they do. So it's going to be, unless they're really high up in the draft, it's just going to be more of the same next year.
Yeah, and Yzerman's already saying like they're not expecting Sebastian Cossa to play next year in become a part of the goalie rotation in Detroit next year, and he's a guy he's actually traded up to get him in the in the middle teens, and he's supposed to be the future goaltender of this team, At this point, wouldn't you prefer guys to, instead of bringing in Peter Mrazek at $4+ million a year for a lousy goaltending, why don't you just bring up Kosa and see what the hell he can do at this point? Because goalies are kind of freaky anyway. And if you look for someone to get hot, isn't someone like Kosa, who's supposed to be this elite athlete, one of the top goalie prospects in hockey? Don't you think you would have a better shot of him getting hot instead of a retread backup like Mrazek?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, yes. The answer is yes. By the way, with everything you just said, but it's really, I shouldn't even say it's perplexing. It's maddening.
Yeah.
Where this team is 6 years after he took over, and it's also maddening when you see the other teams in town that have been able to turn their franchises around with an injection of whatever you want to call it. Okay, there's something has happened. The Red Wings have not been able to do that. It's one of the and the Red Wing brand has of course taken a big hit over the years. They used to be one of the best franchises in sports, and that's taken a big hit. I think the NHL needs the Red Wings to be good again. I'm a big believer in certain franchises need to be good for certain leagues to really prosper. I think the Red Wings should be, their revival should be something the NHL wants to see. I'm not suggesting NHL has nothing to do with this, by the way, but I'm just saying that it would be good for the league if the Red Wings were relevant again. Yeah. Unfortunately, like Al says, they're in the worst possible place they can be, and they're just not a fun team. The thing that bothers me, though, that really bothers me is the softness that they have. They're not mentally tough. They always seem to be always teetering on the brink of a mental breakdown all the time. And whether that's within a game, like Nick was talking about earlier, when they were up 2-0 to Washington and then just completely collapsed, or when you're talking about the season itself, where they seem to be mentally fragile, or a couple they took a couple weeks off for the Four Nations, and now that kind of threw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. But it shouldn't. If anything, it should give everybody a chance to rest, recuperate from whatever Nixon cuts they've got and bumps and bruises, and come out and really put the pedal to the metal for the last third of the season. And it didn't happen. And the opposite happened, and they lost a couple of games. They lost that game in Ohio, the Buckeye Stadium, in the snow in the outdoors, where they outshot the Blue Jackets and still lost. They can't keep the puck out of their own net. But there's no one there, guys. There's no strong presence in that dressing room unfortunately, for whatever reason. There's just a bunch of guys, a bunch of dudes. And there's not these guys that you can really, and back in the old days, they had the Brendan Shanahans of the world and the McCartys and the guys like that. Even the guys who weren't big time goal scorers were like these glue guys, Maltby, Draper, those kind of guys. Holmstrom, not big goal scorers, but they were glue guys. They were really very integral to the fabric of that team. And the Red Wings just don't have that. They don't. And hey, there are a lot of teams that are in the same boat as the Red Wings are in the NHL. The NHL is filled with teams like the Red Wings that are going to get like 90 to 93 points, 85 to 95 points, barely be above 500. Couple of good players. There's a lot of teams like that, guys, in the NHL, not just the Red Wings. The NHL is filled with teams like that. It's a very top-heavy league. It really is. And but having said all that, I just wish there was more of an urgency to get into the playoffs. And Steve just seems to be stuck on this. Well, I'm not gonna really go for it until I feel like we're a team that can win the whole thing. And I don't get that. I don't get that mentality.
It feels a little Scott Harris-like, to be honest. It just, I don't know what it is. Maybe is it a Chris Illich-owned team kind of thing? I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. But it does feel kind of like it's just no sense of urgency to get this going right. And I agree with you. I mean, we've talked about it as glue guys, grit. When the Wings were up and coming in the late 80s, they had the likes of Bob Probert, Koser, they had Sean Burr, Gerard Gallant. I mean, these guys are like, they woke up on the wrong side of the bed, especially, and they had a chip on their shoulder if they lost. They were in a bad mood, and they were, even if they weren't the finesse all-star style players, man, those guys fought to try and win. They did everything they could, and these guys don't. It feels like they're always on their heels, being chased by, or what do you call it, chasing the other team before the other team scores yet another goal on them. Remember a couple years back when they still had Nedeljkovic and who the hell was the other guy in there? Doesn't matter, but Grice, I think. Those guys were getting lit up with like 7 goals a game. So no goalie is going to be able to withstand that if their defense is that flat-footed and just kind of, your defense should be making the opponent's offense pay for coming in your zone. And it's just not. It's really a dull team.
Yeah,
and let me add one anytime soon.
Yeah, you're right. And let me add one more thing. I do not want to hear anymore. It's Ken Holland's fault. There are still people trotting that out right now. It's been 6+ years at this point. 3 years ago, sure, I could still maybe buy into that. But this is completely... Excuse me. This is Steve Yzerman's organization. How many guys are left from the Ken Holland era anymore? Larkin and maybe a couple other guys, if that.
Eno was one of them.
Who they just got rid of, exactly.
And Mrazek, who came back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so just don't quit making excuses for Yzerman. It is what it is. He's had a really bad year this year when it comes to roster building and his free agents that he's picked up in trades. Just say he screwed up. Put some heat to the fire. Put his ass to the fire a little bit. And maybe he'll smarten up this off. The guy's got a history of making some smart moves. Whatever happened, he didn't forget how to be a good GM when he came to Detroit. But for whatever reason, these last couple years, he has made some very questionable, to the point of it's just.
Okay.
Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Here's a question. The question that we have asked a multitude of GMs in Detroit over the years.
Yeah.
You and I have been doing this program. This is the question we've asked. It doesn't matter who we're talking about, but this is the question. The question we've asked is, I wonder what the plan is.
Yep.
What's the plan? We asked that question about Weaver. We asked that question about Bob Quinn. We've asked that question about Stan Van Gundy. What is the plan here, guys? What are they trying to do? And I'm starting to get those creepy "what is the plan" vibes with Yzerman now.
Yeah.
Because like Nick said, and you have said as well, these moves have been head scratchers. There doesn't seem to be, to me, other than saying, I want to build the Red Wings to be a sustainable organization. Yeah. Other than saying that, to me, that's not a plan. That's a goal. Okay, there's a difference between a goal and a plan. Okay, my goal is to make the Red Wings sustainable for the future, for the long term. Okay, that's a good goal to have, Steve. What's your plan to get there? And I'm not seeing the plan necessarily. I don't look at the Red Wings and say, I don't think any of us can definitively say, well, this is according to the plan. The plan is this, and this. I don't think we can say that, other than saying the plan is to draft well and wait for these kids to cook. Beyond that, I don't know what the plan is. I really don't. And these moves now that were made last week, especially the Mrazek thing. And I posted on Facebook and Twitter. I said the Red Wings have 3 goalies. Translation: the Red Wings have no goalies. Okay, You have 3, you have none. Yeah. Now I know today in today's game you don't play a guy 70 games like you did when you and I were growing up watching hockey. But right. you still have 2. You have 2. You bring a third guy in, something's not right. Okay, something has gone askew. So I think that it's fair to say, what's the plan, Steve? What's your plan? Now, what's the goal? Not where do you want to be, but how do you plan to get there? And I'm not seeing it.
Say the very least. All right, I think with that, it's a good time to for me to cough and for Greg to go to question 2 of the birthday game.
Okay, long time sideline reporter, especially for the NFL. She has been around the NFL sideline since since the mid '90s, working with Pat Summerall and John Madden. She is black, I will say that, and she is was born in Dallas. That's not going to help you, but she's a black female sports sideline reporter. Has been.
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember her name. I cannot remember her name.
Oh my God!
I know exactly who you're talking about. And I was thinking of her in the first question, but I can't remember her name for the life of me.
Oh no!
I'm drawing a blank. The only one I thought of was the blue-eyed blonde. Her last name's Kramer.
Andrea Kramer. That's who.
No, yeah.
No.
Is it Sue?
Lucky I remember
or?
any of them.
I'll just tell you, it's Pam Oliver.
Pam Oliver. That's it. I know that's one of the ones that first came up. I could not for the life of me remember her name, but I think that says volumes about sideline reporters. Plus, there's so many of them.
I guess.
Everybody's a sideline reporter, feels like.
Yeah. Remember Jim Lampley? He was the first sideline reporter I remember.
Oh, God, that's going back a long time ago. That's going back to the 70s.
Yeah.
I remember him on Wild World of Sports, but he was kind of like the heir apparent to, who am I thinking of?
Keith Jackson?
No, the Jim McKay.
Oh, Jim McKay, yes.
Jim McKay, yes. Oh, well, thank you, Greg. You see, we get at least half credit for that, Nick, because we both knew who he was talking about. We just couldn't come up with the name. We knew who she was, so that should count for something. And we're not playing horseshoes and hand grenades, but whatever. All right.
I just can't think of her that old. That's the problem.
All right. Yeah, Nick keeps playing the "I'm too young" card. That's his go-to.
No. Well, in this case, she's too young.
Yeah.
Like what?
All right. Since we're talking about roster building, transactions, trades, free agency, and so forth, we might as well talk about the Lions because free agency started in the NFL today, and the Lions have been making news over the past couple of days with. Essentially, they did sign a couple of their own players. The biggest name being Derek Barnes, the injured linebacker, who's actually was actually playing very well for them, and they had trouble replacing him once he got hurt. He tore up his knee, but he signed a 3-year, $25.5 million deal. Essentially, it's a 2-year deal for $16 million, and there's an option year that you know how those things work. It's essentially a 2-year deal. And the controversial one was they also re-signed off-injured defensive end Marcus Davenport, but essentially he got signed for the league minimum, 1 year, $2.5 million, but only $1.35 guaranteed. That's essentially, I think, a few $100,000 over the league minimum for a veteran of his ilk. Essentially, they signed him not to be a starting defensive end. They signed him to be a backup rotational guy, and maybe that'll keep him healthy. We'll see. But at the money they gave him, it's not. There's no reason to be so upset the way too much of this fan base got, thinking, "Oh my God, they're bringing back Davenport. Now he's going to get hurt." Blah blah blah. They're not bringing him back to be a starter. You don't pay a starter $1.35 guaranteed. No, we see starters get like Khalil Mack, who got $18 million today for 1 year, and he's 34 fucking years old. But what it really comes down to, though, is they also let Za'Darius Smith go. And that again, you know how the Lions fans are about the pass rush and defensive line. They declined his contract option. They saved roughly $5.7 million this year, $5.2 million in dead cap next year. So essentially, they saved over $11 million by not re-upping with Za'Darius Smith. I think that really came down to he was okay. He played decently after they traded him for him at the deadline, but he's nothing special. He's not a guy you're going to break the bank for, and they desperately don't want any dead cap room apparently because they have a lot of guys they want to re-sign. specifically Aiden Hutchinson, who since we saw the contracts that Max Crosby and Myles Garrett got. Myles Garrett got $40 million a year. Aiden Hutchinson might not get that much, but he's going to get 30 plus. So they really have to kind of figure out where they're going with the salary cap. So that brings us to today. Free agency started, and they lost their number one cornerback in Carlton Davis III. He inked a 3-year, $60 million deal. Actually, it's more like 2 years, 34. That's what's guaranteed with the Patriots. So the Lions immediately announced they had signed apparently the highest-ranked free agent cornerback available, one of the highest-ranked free agents, period, in Jets cornerback DJ Reed, and they signed him to a cheaper deal. Excuse me. 3 years, $48 million, 32 guaranteed, essentially $16 million a year. And he will replace Davis, and he's apparently around the same age. Essentially, they replaced Carlton Davis with another Carlton Davis and DJ Reed, who may even be a better player. There's a lot of people in New York City. He played almost as well as Sauce Gardner, and Sauce Gardner's an all-world cornerback. So that's where things stand as of right now. And when it comes to the roster building, looks like they figured out where they're going to be with the defensive backfield. They have an excellent defensive backfield the way it's looking. Now it's what they're going to do with the front seven, and it really, what are they going to do with edge? That's really what it comes down to, guys. So I'll go with you, Greg. What's your thoughts on what's happened over the past week with the Lions, with their roster building, who they're keeping, who they're moving on from, and what they might do from here?
Well, again, this is in contrast to the team we just talked about. You always feel like with Brad Holmes was a plan. You feel like that the team is in good hands. You feel like he knows what he's doing. You feel like he's got, you just feel like he's moving the pieces around on the chessboard the way he wants them to move. That's what you feel like anyway.
Yeah.
I think the trust in him right now is very sky high, and as well it should be. He hasn't really done anything that makes you feel otherwise. Smith, I might be in the minority here, but I thought he was kind of a disappointment. I didn't think he really did much as a Lion. I thought he had a couple of okay games. I thought he was mostly invisible. He was very visible against the Commanders in the playoffs.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, he was nowhere in that playoff game.
Yeah, I wasn't really impressed by him, and I know part of that might be his age. They may re-sign him, and you know how it goes in the NFL. You cut guys, sometimes you bring them back with cheaper contracts. I don't think I don't think that one was that big of a loss, quite frankly. Right. I just didn't think he brought much. I was glad when they got him because I thought he could bring something. I just didn't think he did. I thought he had a couple of okay games, and mostly he was just another guy. Just another guy in the rotation. He wasn't really now. I might be all wet on that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he took some heat off other players on the line. Maybe he was better than I thought. I give him credit for. But I just didn't think he was all that great with the Lions. And he's 32, 33, so that makes sense. He wouldn't be that good. So that's, to me, that's not that big of a deal. I think that I think the Lions can still do pass rush by committee as long as Aiden Hutchinson is part of that committee. I really do. Would it be great to get another big name guy? Of course it would. But I don't think they have to do that. Like I told you before, I'm more concerned about the linebacking position than I am what's going on the line. The line has got a lot of guys who are going to be coming back from injury. McNeil's one of them. I know Davenport's hurt all the time. I get that. That doesn't make me warm and fuzzy. But I think that collectively, and we haven't even talked about the draft yet next month. Collectively, what they have, I think, is okay. If they add,
they were good before the injury started last year on the defensive line.
I think it's the linebacking core that could use a little bit of help. And the reason I say that is because when Alex Anzalone went down last year, that group suffered a little bit. I know that the pass.
Well, you got to remember at that point they didn't have Rodriguez, they didn't have Anzalone, they didn't have Barnes.
That's
true. That's like 4 year. That's your three of your top four linebackers.
I'm just saying in terms of depth. And I don't expect because anybody expects injuries to be such a factor next year as they were this year. We hope not, but
fingers crossed.
Right. So that's why I'm just saying that I feel like they could use a little more help at linebacker than they could elsewhere. I'm probably in the minority in that opinion, but I have no. It's too early. I mean, I want to see what happens after the draft. I want to see what happens after the free agency period's over with. I like the read.
That's the two words right there. That's the three words right. It's too early.
Yeah.
They get worked up about this. It really is.
Yeah.
And you said the draft's coming up, free agency. We're still going to have the June 1st cuts. Guys are still going to get cut throughout the season.
Right.
So who the hell knows at this point? Who could become available? Right. And odds are some very serviceable to good linemen are going to be available, be it defensive tackles or edge players. And he's like Brad Holmes is likely going to address it sometimes during the draft, hopefully on the higher side. But I think we know, Nick, at this point, the Lions don't draft by positional need; they draft by best player available. And if that best player available is a wide receiver or a safety, they will draft that guy and just make it work. And I don't have a problem with that because it's worked so far.
Yeah, I with Brad Holmes, it's ironic. In contrast to what we're seeing with like Steve Yzerman and roster building, like Brad Holmes knows how to roster build. Mm-hmm. He's not picking guys just because of name. He's being very selective who he tries to both draft and trade for. Right. And sign as free agents. And when you put those players together on a field, it seems to work overall. Yeah. It's hard to say how good Za'darius Smith was. I'm thinking about it like he was there as part of a real patchwork defense. Yeah. Like they were struggling no matter who was out there. So I don't know if I could say anything about an individual player on that. Maybe he's better. And he'll play better with a better roster around him too. It's a different ball game. I don't know. I honestly don't. But as far as Holmes goes, I agree with you guys. It's too early to say anything as to what the roster is. I got tired of listening to, well, we should get Myles Garrett. He's available. He wants a trade. He'll come to Detroit. It's like, no, you want to give him $40 million a year for one defensive end? Like, that's quarterback money. Hell, Sam Darnold, I think, just signed for
30.
3 years, $100 million.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, as I saw someone say, Myles Garrett got Danny Dimes money. He got paid the same as the Giants starting quarterback, as bad as he may be. But and once again. That's Cleveland screwing up the pay scale for a position because they did the same thing at quarterback with Deshaun Watson, and that blew up in their face. Excuse me. So, but yeah, it's I think it's pretty obvious you can't pay two defensive ends $30 to $40 million each. It's just untenable at the salary cap. And the same thing's going to happen with Trey Hendrickson. He supposedly wants a trade. It ain't happening. Nice not to Detroit. It's just not.
No. And
not when you got Hutchinson. Not when you got to pay Hutchinson.
If the Lions front office has been smart at roster building. You don't have to bust the bank for like one star player just to make news or to show that you're trying to win, and just bring that guy in and all of a sudden have nothing else left. I mean, another Pistons analogy is like when Stan Van Gundy brought in Blake Griffin. Yeah. And which honestly, he's a great player, but his knees are like, minced meat. He's just like so injured that. Yeah,
he literally used up his body that season to carry that team to the playoffs. He literally did.
Basically, and then Detroit gave up a lot to get him too. Mm-hmm. And did it do much overall? They got him into the playoffs, but they won nothing.
Yep, really. Got swept.
So yeah, I'm glad they're not just going balls to the wall for just some high-profile player just because he's available.
Yeah, like what the Bears. Yeah, like what the Bears are doing. They just signed 3 offensive linemen to start. Didn't the Lions do something like that like 10 years ago? When they TJ, what's his name, and
Lang.
Yeah, they signed TJ Lang and the former Michigan guard or tackle who's now on 97 won the ticket. If you know what I'm talking about. The former Washington. What's that? The former Washington.
John Jansen.
And they signed John Jansen. Exactly. Those two. They brought them in. They said, they're going to start on our offensive line. They lasted 1 year, and they were both washed up, essentially. Mm-hmm. So, it's and that's what the Bears are doing right now. What Nick's saying, they're throwing money at their offensive line when they would be better served to do what the Lions did after that, where they actually threw draft picks at the offensive line. Because look, I mean, Sewell and Ragnow and Decker, all first-round draft picks. Glasnow was a third-round pick. And then they only have one free agent on the offensive line, and that's Zyder, and they already pretty much got his replacement lined up, and another draft pick in Christian Mahogany. That's how you build an offensive line. That's how you build a roster. So, yeah, Nick's right. You can't throw money around willy-nilly, at least not in the NFL. It just doesn't work that way.
I don't know if you remember, Al, but way back in '93, the Lions tried that. They threw money at they signed 3 offensive linemen. They were all guards.
Yeah.
Bill Fralick, Dave Richards, and Dave Lutz. And they
Bill Fralick. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
They converted one of them to a tackle because they signed 3 guards. You can only play 2 guards at a time. So they switched one. I can't remember who switched to tackle. So Wayne tried to buy an offensive line.
Yep.
And a lot of money on those 3 guys, and it didn't work out. I mean, they were okay, but you're right. Throwing draft picks at the line is a lot better. It's hard to buy an offensive line.
Yes.
It just is. I know that was a weakness for sure. The Bears definitely had a weakness. I mean, Williams was beaten silly last year.
Yeah.
And they definitely need improvement. I know the Bears fans are excited about all these new linemen, but I think it's a shortcut that usually doesn't pan out.
Right. Yeah, that was just. Remember, was it Gosder Churlius? The Lions gave him a huge free agent contract from the Pats, and it turned out he was another one of those Patriots players who never panned out once he got a big deal and got away from New England. Yeah. It's just and that tends to happen a lot. With certain with the Lions, at least back in the day, it seemed to happen to them all the time. Well, looking back to Pat Swilling, that we finally got our pass rushing lineman, and he was a bust. They kept throwing money at this shit, and it never worked. Ultimately, you have to build through the draft, and then you pick and choose where you sign, like they'd been doing with cornerback, and they've been very successful finding top of the line cornerbacks to plug in. But again, they're saving that money because they still have a lot of guys on rookie contracts, and that's going to change in a couple of years. But yeah, I think we're all in pretty much agreement that yes, they need linemen. It's too early to make any kind of judgment as to what they're going to do, or who they're going to get, or what's going to work and what's not going to work. And it's just really funny though, guys, just how all of a sudden how the NFL really is a 365-day league anymore. We've gone from the playoffs to the Super Bowl to the combine. Now we're in the free agency. Then we have the draft next month, and then we'll have OTAs. And next thing you know, it's going to be training camp, and we're going to be talking about the Lions all through this. They're damn brilliant. They really, really are.
I'll give them credit for one more thing.
Yeah.
That is definitely one league where a team can turn it around really fast.
Yeah.
Like the Lions, who would have ever thought they would, jettison Quinn Trisha, and then 3 years later, they're a 14-win team or something.
And their coaching staff is being raided.
Completely, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And that's uncharted territory for us.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So, and not only rated to be assistant somewhere else, but head coaches of all things.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you guys: do you guys make? I'm sure you may have heard it. I don't know if you heard about the so-called controversy of supposedly Ben Johnson throwing shade at Jared Goff during interviews, where now he was saying where he's excited to coach a player who can create what's the term? He can create when things break down. He can be creative. And he goes, "I haven't had that," and people took that as he was taking a backhanded compliment or however you want to put it at Jared Goff. When to me, it really, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it feels to me what he was saying in these interviews about, I think he also made another crack about Penei Sewell was a better passer than Jared Goff. I think he put it as when we were working on that trick play and Sewell was throwing dimes and he was, he's better than he was better than even Goff. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And to me, that is just Ben Johnson out of the Dan Campbell playbook, throwing red meat to the fan base. That's exactly what that was.
I'm going to say one little thing about Ben Johnson. I think this sums it up. Fuck Ben Johnson. I don't care anymore. He's gone. He's the coach of another team. Fuck him. He had his, he did a lot of great things as an offensive coordinator. He did too many cute, stupid things at the wrong time, too. So,
yep.
And he's not a member of the Lions staff, players, roster, anything anymore. Fuck him. Mm-hmm. He's the Bears coach. He's an opponent now. Just like Matt Stafford when he left for L.A.
Yeah.
Fuck him. So.
That might be the title of the podcast. Fuck Ben Johnson. That's one thing is that now we can stop talking about him. But yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, Greg, but that is just a head coach playing, trying to make his fan base feel better, or throwing some red meat out to his fan to the fan, much like Dan Campbell's kneecap comments. And that was constantly made fun of, but he wasn't talking to the media. He was talking to the fans, and the fans ate that shit up. I'm sure fans in Chicago are eating this crap up right now that Ben Johnson has, but it also could be maybe he's being a little too much try hard, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, there's a big difference between being a coordinator in the NFL and being a head coach.
We've seen that in Detroit a lot.
And it's not just about winning and losing and being the man versus not being the man. And all that.
Yeah.
Because this day and age, coordinators do get a lot of heat as well. I mean, it's not like it's not a heat-free job. I get that, but there's a big difference in terms of the things that you say. The things that you say as a head coach are amplified more than they are if you're saying them as a coordinator. I think what some of this is just Ben needs to just remember he's new. He's a rookie head coach, and I know he's not a rookie to football. I get it. He's not a rookie to coaching, but he's a rookie head coach, and he probably could have been okay if he had just said, "I'm excited to have a guy with Caleb's elusiveness," or whatever you want to use, and leave it at that. I think where he probably should not have said was that little line about "I've never had that before." I don't know what good that serves. I don't know what he's trying to do there. Why can't it just be good enough to say, I'm really excited about Caleb Williams. This guy's got a lot of he's elusive. He can make things happen. I'm excited to coach him. Why then also say, I've never had that before?
Right.
To me, it's just kind of. I know Nick is going to poo-poo it and say, "Well, fuck him, he's not." I get that. I understand that, but
you read me like a book.
I'm just trying to explain. I'm just trying to explain what if you just want to if you want to dissect this one thing that he said, the Sewell thing. I don't know what that was all about. I don't know what that was all about. That's such an outlier. I'm not going to talk about it. But this little crack about I've never had that before. I don't know. You're coaching a team in here's the other thing. You're coaching a team in your division now. It's not like Ben went off and is coaching like Aaron Glenn is coaching the Jets, or he's coaching the Colts or the Raiders. He's coaching the Bears, so they're going to play the Lions twice a year. Why you would give a team in your own division any sort of fodder? If you believe in locker room bulletin board material, if you believe in that thing, some people do and some people don't. If you believe in that, why give an opponent you're going to be playing twice a year any additional incentive to kick your ass? I just feel like that's what he did. And you're right. The Chicago fans, they worship Ben Johnson right now. That was the guy they wanted. They're head over heels about this guy. Anything he says, and believe me, I've been on Bears Reddit. Literally anything this guy says is gospel right now because they're in that honeymoon period. He hasn't coached a game yet. Let's see what happens when they're 6-11 next year, which they could be. You never know. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens when they're 6-11. That luster will wear off mighty quick, I can tell you. So we'll see.
He's also made some taken some shots at Green Bay too, since taking over as the Bears.
Oh, I'm all for that.
But I mean, he's playing up to the fans.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't coach for Green Bay.
Right.
So,
Well, the Lions made him a very wealthy man, and gave him an opportunity. It was his job with the Lions was a direct springboard to what he's got now in Chicago.
Yeah, he was an assistant tight ends coach or something originally.
He was given an opportunity. He was a freaking tight ends coach. Okay.
Yeah.
Then he was made the passing game coordinator. Then he was made the offensive coordinator. Why? Because Dan Campbell saw something in this guy, and Dan Campbell was right to give him these promotions.
Yeah.
So why you take all the shots you want at Green Bay? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But why would you take shots at the team that just gave you the opportunity to be? I don't know. It's just weird. I think I get the impression he's kind of a weird guy. Maybe not quite as eccentric as Harbaugh is, but I get the feeling that Ben is just kind of just a little bit off, and that's my impression.
he's on the spectrum.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm around a lot of people who are on the spectrum, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Mentioned your line of work. Yeah, your line of work. What you've been doing, I'd imagine you have been exposed to a lot of
myself
that,
included. So
yeah.
Takes one to know one.
All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Really, there's not much else to bring up about the Lions right now because right now free agency is a whole 8 hours old or so right now. So yeah, and the draft is a month away, and who knows what's going to happen over the next few weeks. So yeah, it is what it is at this point. I'm sure they will ultimately address the defensive line. It may not be right away, but it will be addressed. Say what you will about Brad Holmes, he's not stupid, and he's a damn good GM. They'll figure something out. What it might be would, And again, fans, we're dumb. We really are. What do they say? A person is smart, people are dumb. I think you could kind of say the same thing with fan bases. A fan can be smart, but a fan base can be dumb. And we're seeing it a lot with the Lions right now, how they're just losing their mind over the littlest thing right now. So, all right, let's move on to the Pistons since Greg cut us a break and gave us the birthday game after two questions. Pistons playing very well. A little bit of a slump. Well, I wouldn't say a slump because West Coast road trips are never easy. They went 2-2 on a West Coast swing. I will take that every time.
Yep.
Considering some of the struggles that we've seen the Pistons have, even back to the Bad Boys years that they've had on the West Coast. But the Pistons, after going 2-2 on a West Coast swing, they lost to the Clippers. They gave up 50 to James Harden. Is there a more frustrating basketball player in the world to watch than James Harden? He plays the ugliest brand of basketball. It's all about. He shot 23 free that game. That's basically what his game is just fishing for fouls, which makes it so goddamn ugly. But he put up a 50 on the Pistons, and Clippers I think won by like 7 or 8 points, and then they lost a very winnable game against what could have been a winnable game against the Warriors, and that was essentially Draymond Green hit a fucking prayer from 3, as it was in our chat. The fucking Spartan hit a 3. So if there's another guy I hate that I cannot stand, it's Draymond Green. But be that as it may, they lost that game, but they bounced back. They were up big on Portland last night, but they had to hang on. But they got the win. Any road win I will take. I don't care if it's ugly or pretty or a blowout or a buzzer beater. I will take a win on the road in the NBA. So with that, they're 36-29. They're 5.5 games up on the 7th-seeded Hawks. They're the 6th seed right now. As things stand right now, they're out of the play-in. They would be in the playoffs, and I think right now they would ultimately play the. If things stood the way they are today, they would play the Knicks, and that's a matchup I like. I don't want to see them play the Milwaukee. They match up horribly with, but in Indiana would literally be a war. It'd be a rock fight. Those two teams do not like each other. That's pretty obvious. But the Knicks look beatable. But regardless of all that, they're only, and plus they're only one game back of the 4th seed right now. They literally have a shot at home court, which is unfathomable to think of this time last year. And something else. They're at 36 wins right now. This is their first time they've won 36 games since 2019. And of course, to remind everybody, we're in 2025 right now.
Yep.
So it is absolutely. And much like Nick mentioned that how the Wings are a slog to watch, the Pistons are the 180 of that. They are fun to watch. And I don't know about you guys. We're Detroit sports fans. We're Pistons fans. We're old school Pistons fans. And you know what? We like defense. We like hard nosed. We won't take any bullshit from you. We will stand up for ourselves kind of ball. And that's how the Pistons are playing right now. And they're also playing very well in the paint. I mean, one of the most visible ones of this recent winning streak, they outscored the Celtics in the paint 62-20 in that win over the Celtics. If that's domination down low. I mean, that's the kind of ball I love to see. I hate. That's another thing. Yes, I know the league is a 3-point shooting league now for the most part, but watching the Celtics throw up 53 pointers isn't basketball to me. And the Pistons, I love how the Pistons are playing basketball because, yes, they do take more than their fair share of threes. I mean, Malik Beasley shooting the lights out for fuck's sake. But they have guys who have a nice mid-range game, like Tobias Harris, and for that matter, Cade Cunningham. Those guys play very well in the mid-range and can be very, very effective in today's game. So, Greg, I'll throw it to you after my little 5-minute rant there. Your thoughts on the Pistons right now?
Well, I mean, the thing that I find most impressive about them is the types of games that they're winning. Not that they have 36 wins, although that is very impressive, no question about it. But it's the games they're winning now that they haven't won in recent years. You know,
right?
Second games of back-to-backs, beating teams that they should beat, coming from behind, going on the road and winning in hostile environments, not losing their cool or losing their composure late in tight games. You get the feeling now that they will win a tight game late. They're not going to collapse. You mentioned the Golden State game. They didn't collapse there. You mentioned Green hit a three, and they said that
was his first 3-pointer in the fourth quarter, I think, all season long. They
couldn't quite get over the hump there. It's okay. I mean, that's a pretty good team over there. That's no shame there. But what did they do? They went into Portland, a team that they should be, because Portland's 7 or 8 games under 500.
Yeah,
and they handled them, and then they made a close game. I mean, they made a lead kind of disappear, but they still hung on and won. And I think that's what I'm most excited about this team. Isn't just the 36 wins. It's how far they've come in terms of maturing, seeing the parts gelling, seeing these vets come in. The Schroeder thing was, I'm sorry, that was a great pickup by Langdon. Schroeder is exactly why, because he filled a need, and that's what I mean. Again, we were talking about Stevie earlier in the program with the Red Wings,
right? And
we're all collectively like, God, what is he doing? What's the plan? But Langdon goes out now and addresses a need that is a right now need, not I got this guy. Maybe in the future he might be something. He's going to play in the G League for a little bit. No. This is an NBA veteran that addresses a need, which was another ball handler to give Cade a blow and to provide solid minutes when Cade is on the bench, because I don't think they're going to play too often together on the floor at the same time. That was a distinct need. How many times were we saying, we hope Cade's not going to break down? Yeah. He's playing 42 minutes. He's going to break down as we get toward the end of the season. And, now, not so much now, because now you've got Schroeder who can come in, play 8 to 12 minutes in a stretch if he has to, play 15, 20 minutes a night if he has to, knock down some shots. He's smart. He's a smart player. He knows his way around the NBA. This is already his third team this season, which is
he's played for a ridiculous amount of teams, but he's also a solid ball player. Yeah,
some guys who bounce around because they're bounce around. Schroeder, I don't think that Schroeder's bouncing around is an indictment on Schroeder. I think that's just the way it's gone for his career. I don't think it's been because there's the flip side to always being traded is there's always somebody who wants you. You look at it that way too.
Yeah.
But Langdon went out and saw a need and was smart enough to address that and kind of didn't get kind of got lost in the shuffle of the whole Jimmy Butler thing. But the Pistons were one of the 4 teams in that trade, and they came away without giving away anything really, and came away with Schroeder. Yep. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Those are the kind of moves that aren't going to necessarily win you GM of the year, but those are the things that when you're addressing a need immediately, you see something that you need, or you see this guy available. That's a good move. That's a good, smart basketball front office move. And you can see already he's only been here for about a month. You can see how much this guy has helped the second unit. It's unbelievable. And they were playing well, of course, before the trade, but now that's a trade that I just think is not getting a lot of. I know the fans like it. Don't get me wrong. Fans like Schroeder. I'm not saying they don't, but that trade in the pantheon of the NBA is not getting the kind of recognition it should because that's a very smart pickup. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last night. They one of the ways Portland got back in that game is they were trapping Cade Cunningham, and he could not beat the trap, and they were double teaming him as soon as he crossed over the timeline. So how they fixed that? They brought in Schroeder, who was a better ball handler,
right?
And he was able to break the trap, and and essentially, what they ended up doing was moving Cade off the ball, and kept Schroeder at the point. And it worked great, because Cade, say what you will about Cade, great player. He's on the verge of superstardom, but you can still see the youth in him, the way he sometimes is too casual with his passes.
Yes.
Sometimes he dribbles himself into trouble, like we've seen with the traps, like we saw last night. He dribbles himself into trouble and gets caught. And a veteran like Schroeder is something that the Pistons can now lean on, a legit ball handler, which they, as you said, Greg, they desperately needed a second ball handler. And again, that's roster building. How about that?
Right.
Smart roster building. Nick, what are your thoughts right now on the Pistons? I know you've been watching a lot of the Pistons, especially on this road trip.
Well, I watched them a lot last year, and I watched the last couple of years, and I watched them this year. Completely different team.
Yeah.
A totally different team. A lot of the roster is the same, but it's a really different team. What used to happen is, I said it many times, they would go down 20, 30 points like right away, and then they would play the rest of the game in a 25-point deficit and lose by 25 points.
Right.
And they played no defense whatsoever, whereas now they're mugging everybody. They're very handsy. I don't know how many – those guys just crave blocking shots. But Duran, you'll see Thompson, you'll see Stewart just flying after that ball every chance they get. And much better defense. They picked Steph Curry's pocket a few times. Thompson did for sure. So they're very aggressive. And then when they start running, they're scoring. It's great. It's great to see them fight, and they fight all 48 minutes of that game, of any game. So they're playing, all 48 minutes of that. They don't just kind of give up or piss away a game. Plus, the other part I see is last couple of years they looked completely disorganized. Whether it was Monty coaching them, whether it was Dwayne Casey coaching them, they were. They would get behind, and then they would start throwing up desperation three-point shots and miss left and right. You got a problem when Isaiah Livers is your go-to guy from three-point line. It was the most frustrating thing to see, and it was basically just chuck up a three, miss it, let the other team rebound it, run it back, and score. It was happening over and over again. Not now. Now they're doing the mid-range shots like you're talking about. Beasley's hitting mid-range shots in addition to his shimmy three and shimmy, and but Cade is there. Cade now has a different problem. They're respecting Cade, and so they're double teaming him, and he's going to have to adjust his game to
Right.
get around those double teams because they're taking him really seriously. So, and I think it's probably like what City said. Cade's got to bulk up and like bull his way through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're going to mug him repeatedly now because he will put up 30, 40 points a night. So if he's allowed, it's such a different game from last year. I love watching them now because they're fighting the whole time to try and win.
Yeah, like you said, this was a team a year ago that was playing Killian Hayes and Isaiah Livers 25, 30 minutes a night. And I know Livers isn't even in the league, and Hayes was picked up by Brooklyn not long ago. I have no idea if he's still with them or not.
Released. He was released.
He was released
after
again?
the Piston game. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there you go. So, yeah, it's I thought this team, this absolute ceiling, if everything went perfectly for the Pistons, I was hoping they would push 30 wins. And that's more than double. Now, they won 14 games last year. How many teams actually even improved their win losses by 10? If not more. Yeah, this team could end up coming close to tripling how many games they won compared to last year. Yeah. I mean, they're on track to probably win at least 43, 44 games. And that's unfathomable to me after what last year looked like.
You know what? Again, what's impressive about this is that typically when you see a turnaround like that in the NBA, it's because of like a generational player has been drafted. You look at the NBA, the history of the NBA. You've seen teams like look at the Bucks the year before they drafted Kareem and the year after they drafted Kareem. Okay, look at the Knicks before they drafted Ewing and after they drafted Ewing. Look, you go through history and see all these David Robinson with the Spurs and then Tim Duncan with the Spurs. All these teams that were shit, and then you bring in a transitional player, and then they even the Pistons of '81 won 21 games the year before, won 39 the year after. Why? Because they got Isaiah and Kelly Tripucka. But that's what's impressive about this. They didn't do that. The Pistons didn't do that. They didn't bring in some shiny new draft choice who was drafted 3rd overall who's contributing to this. It's just been smart front office stuff. Cutting the dead weight. You mentioned Livers and Hayes. Cutting the dead weight. I just looked at the Basketball Reference. I remember City saying this as well. They drafted 31 players last year, the Pistons did. Okay? And look at it was just some off-season moves. Obviously a new coach. I mean, there's a lot of things to it, but it wasn't like they brought in some hot shit. It wasn't a big free agent. It wasn't a big name draft choice. It was just the core, like Nick said. The main core is still here. The small little core.
Right.
Ivy's been down. When Ivy went down in January 1st, everybody thought that's it. Season's over.
Yep.
They've taken off since Ivy's gone down.
Right. Yeah.
Just think how good they're going to be when he comes back.
Right.
I don't even know where he's going to play now. I really don't. So this is not your typical turnaround where you've just injected a superstar or a generational draft pick. It's not like they drafted Wemby and put him in the lineup. This is just good old-fashioned Jack McCloskey style, old school roster building. And I think that's what has got me excited about this because the stuff they've given up versus what they've gotten back, at least this year, is obscene.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, on their trade deadline, they picked up Schroeder and they picked up one other guy. They literally did not give up a draft pick or anything. I think they just gave other teams some cap space.
Basically, yeah.
Which I had never noticed that before out of any team, but certainly not the Pistons. I guess Troy Weaver was trying to do that, but he sort of shit the bed and he never picked up anybody any good, really. So it's impressive. It's impressive. It's such a different team to watch.
Did any of Troy Weaver's rehab attempts work out? Remember all of these failed first-round picks he tried to pick up? Yeah, I don't think any of them. I don't think a single one of them panned out. Yeah. So
Wiseman was traded again and hurt. He's out for the season. Bagley, I don't know if he's in the league even. He might be buried in Washington State.
I think he tore up his knee.
Oh, did he?
I think he got hurt. So, But all these guys that he picked up along the way really still haven't amounted to much of anything in the league. And I just remember during the offseason, especially people out of Philadelphia, said Tobias Harris, and look where things stand now. Philadelphia has absolutely fallen apart. They replaced Tobias Harris with Paul George, and Paul George has been awful this year. He's become more known as a podcaster than a ball player at this point. They gave him a $50 million a year contract. He's still under contract for another 3 years. He's already 34 years old. And people are laughing at the Pistons giving Tobias Harris $20 million a year, and it's become obvious that guy has become one of the leaders on the team. And it is worth noting that the 2 games they lost on the West Coast one of the games they lost in the West Coast trip was a game that Tobias Harris missed for personal reasons. It's obvious he's become a leader and a mentor on that team. I think you say the same about the other veterans on the team as well, Hardaway and Malik Beasley. These guys. And the thing is, these veterans also look like they're having fun.
Yeah,
which says volumes. I mean, I love watching Beasley for his stupid little shimmy after he makes a 3-pointer. I mean, it's dumb as hell, but it's also entertaining. And it's obvious his teammates love it, and the fan bases really get into it as well. No, even Bickerstaff made a joke about it the other day when he said something to the effect that you're a bad influence on young ball players. Like even my kid wants to shimmy after a 3. That's a guy who was outplaying his contract. They signed Beasley, I think, for $6 million for 1 year. And he is having one of the best 3-point shooting seasons in NBA history. So that's how you have to do things in sports. You have to find guys who can outplay their contracts, and that's what Beasley's doing right now.
If you were okay, right now they would match up against the Knicks if today. Okay, the Knicks are like 5 games in front of them. Would you want to play the Pistons in the first round?
Oh, hell no.
Forget the Knicks. I mean, any team.
Yeah.
Would you want to play this team in the first round of the playoffs that's, to me, still playing with – they've played this whole season with house money, the entire season. And they'll play with more house money when they get to the playoffs. And I know that expectations have been raised a little bit now. The fans are getting a little excited that they're probably not going to be as content with the first-round sweep, of course, like maybe they would have been with the Red Wings. But I don't think they're going to sweep. But anyway, regardless, would you want to play this team right now when you've got guys like Beasley can win playoff series? They can win playoffs. They can destroy you in a short series. They really can.
Yep.
Look what Bernard King did with the Pistons in '84 when he averaged 40 points a game in a 5-game series. He was unbelievable. I've never seen a guy do that before.
It was frustrating to watch.
And
as a Pistons fan.
And he didn't do it with a 3-point shot either, by the way. He did it in the paint. He
right.
scored like every point he had in the paint almost. So I don't know why you would want to play this team with all those intangibles that they're just loosey-goosey, having fun. You play a series and Malik Beasley shoots 46% from the 3-point line in 6 games.
Wow.
I mean, those are the kinds of things. Those are the things that coaches have nightmares about, and they can make your summer very, very long. Because if you play a team like that and get it's an old buzzsaw thing. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win a series necessarily.
Right.
I don't know if I'd want to play the Pistons in the first round. I really don't.
Yeah, I would be. If depending on the matchup, especially if they end up playing, say, they end up playing, say, the Pacers or the Knicks, I would be disappointed if they didn't win at least a couple games.
Right.
Milwaukee, they don't match up with because they just can't stop the Greek Freak. They can't stop Giannis. But it's all about matchups. And a couple of these other teams that they could play in the playoffs, I think they match up against pretty darn well. Hell, they match up pretty decently against the Celtics. We saw that the other night. If the Celtics aren't dropping threes, they're eminently beatable. And we saw that. And the Pistons, and there's one thing that the Pistons do now that they play defense.
Right.
And seeing Isaiah, and that's another thing. This team has taken Isaiah Stewart would have fit in with the old bad boys.
Yes.
He takes no shit from anybody.
Thompson, by the way, would.
He would as well. You're right. And what I like about I love seeing Warriors fans get all upset that Isaiah Stewart stood up to Steph Curry. the other night because Curry wouldn't celebrate in front of the bench after hitting a shot or something like that. And Isaiah Stewart's like, no, you're not going to do that. And then he touched him. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm thinking, what would these fans have been like if they had been watching basketball in the 80s? When guys were throwing punches in the paint, and there weren't even fouls being called. Remember when Bill Laimbeer got mugged by Robert Parrish in the paint in the playoff game?
Yep.
I don't even think a foul was called, if I remember right.
Maybe not, yeah.
Yeah, no one got suspended. Today, they would be called for criminal charges.
Right.
So, yeah. So that's what I love about some of these guys. And you mentioned, especially with Beef Stew and Ozzer Thompson, these guys, and I think the rookie, Ron
Holland.
Ron Holland. He's another one. Yeah, Ron Holland. He's another one with that hard ass attitude, which I love to see in young players.
They take no shit.
Yeah, and as Pistons fans, that the two greatest eras of Pistons basketball was defined by players who were just like that, and that's what I love to see about this.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, the game with the Warriors, that was looking to be like an 80-point game for a long time.
Right.
I mean, it was just a slugfest back and forth.
Yep.
The Warriors won at the very end just because they put Steph Curry to the line or gave him the ball. But he's
Yeah, there were some mistakes that this team made because they were young. And they didn't deny Curry the ball at the end of the game, so they had to foul him. He's the last guy you wanted to send to the line, for example. But yeah, it's but still, it's a year ago. That game's over the third quarter. Hell, it might be over at halftime. So, but yeah, it's I hate using the term grit because it really feels like it's overused in Detroit now after the Lions, but it really describes this group of Pistons. They're gritty.
I'm going to make a comment about that because I made this comment many times before. Like, our Detroit teams that have won championships have all been sort of these gritty, get down and dirty teams,
right?
And Detroit sports fans eat that shit up, and I include myself in that.
I do too. Yeah,
I mean, what do you think the Bad Boys was? I mean, they didn't mind getting ugly. They weren't these finesse, all-stars.
They could do that, but they could be a finesse team. They could score, but when they had to be nasty, they had no problem doing it.
It just happens to be like the whole grit thing is always now a Lions thing, but I call bullshit on that when Lions are late to the game on that.
Yeah.
The Pistons were doing that, like both both sets of champions were like that.
Yeah, exactly.
The Red Wings had the finesse, but man, they had to fight and claw before they won Stanley Cups too.
And then, for that matter, they actually had third and fourth line guys who could mix it up. And between the grind line and or before that when they had Kosher and Probert, stuff like that. They had guys that weren't afraid to get down and dirty and do the nasty shit that sometimes needs to be done. And the Pistons have that in like three and a few of their players now, which is great to see. And that's why I love Beef Stew so much. And plus, he's another guy I think who's outplaying his country. It's funny it took them this long to figure out that Isaiah Stewart is not a stretch four. He's an undersized 5 who, when you bring him off the bench and play him 20 to 25 minutes, he can play dominating defense. He had 5 blocks last night in under 20 minutes. That's Ben Wallace numbers, for Christ's sake. I'm not saying he's Ben Wallace, but that's the kind of defense he's bringing to this team. He's bringing a defense that wasn't there before, a guy who could protect the rim. And now I think it's rubbing off on Jalen Duren, because even Duren admitted that he started the season off playing soft, not playing well, and he's turned it up a notch over the past 2 months as well, and he's playing great, playing a much better defense, and he's great on the pick and roll of Cade. And seeing him take off has been fun to see.
Yeah, it's totally. It's funny with like Beef Stew. his first few seasons, he was still that sort of ornery guy. But
Yeah.
when you suck, you just look like a lunatic, right?
Yeah.
You
Yep.
look like you have some mental problems. He should be on medication, like go to therapy, or you just tell him to play defense, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is, but it's the same
Ornery
guy,
though ornery is a great word for him. It really is. I think it describes him to a T.
And I'm fine with him giving shit to Steph Curry.
Yeah.
So I'm perfectly happy with that. So
yeah, exactly. They shouldn't show fear or there's a difference between being detrimental, being too respectful. There's one thing to show respect to the people you play against, but it's another one to defer to them and just take it, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And Beef Stew is like, no, we're not going to take that shit. So if you can dish it out, we'll dish it out. I'd love to see that. All right, before we wrap it up, we should at least touch on the Tigers a little bit as they are in spring training. And obviously, when we last talked, I said it's been a month. The Alex Bregman stuff was still ongoing, and then it turned out that he finally signed with the Red Sox, 3 years, $120 million, opt out after 1 year. Reportedly, the Tigers offered 6 years, $171 million, with an opt out after 2026. So it would have been after 2 seasons. And it's seeing the deals. Essentially, Bregman signed essentially a $50 million 1 year deal because he's going to opt out. And it's also obvious that Bregman wanted to use the Green Monster to inflate his offensive numbers and go back to free agency. He was never going to sign in Detroit. It looked like he was using Detroit as leverage. So now it looks like we'll be going into, especially now with the injuries, that Matt Vierling is not going to be on the roster for opening day because of a strained rotator cuff. Third base is likely going to be a platoon of Jace Jung and Andy Ibanez. So now that drama's over with, Greg, how do you like the Tigers roster so far? Where do you think they stand?
Well, on paper, I like their pitching. Okay?
Yep.
I think that should be a strength. With Meadows out, as much as I dislike Vierling as a third baseman, his bat is okay.
Yeah.
In this day and age of baseball, not 30 years ago in baseball, that he would have been a bench player. But in today's baseball, he's okay.
Yeah.
And so that's not going to help. We don't know about Baez. We don't know about Torkelson. We don't know about how the young kids are going to come back in year 2. Keith, Justin Henry Malloy, a whole bunch of these youngsters. There's a lot of guys who are young.
Yep.
Okay. We don't know how they're going to respond. We like to think that the playoff run last year will help them. We don't know.
Yeah.
They're not going to sneak up on anybody anymore. I think Cleveland is still the class of the division, albeit not by much, but I think they are. The Twins, I refuse to handicap the Twins. I refuse to do it. But I think the Tigers, if they can keep the scores low with their pitching, I think they could scratch out some wins. I'm still not thrilled with the offense. I especially don't like Meadows and Vierling missing. I don't know. Who knows? Vierling scares me because he's got not Vierling. Meadows scares me because he's got this
mysterious nerve issue. Yeah, right.
And that just, to me, that.
And they're just saying he's ready when he's ready. Whatever decides the.
I don't like that. It's
disturbing.
That smacks of. I don't know what that smacks of, but that's kind of creepy. I don't like that. I think Vierling will come back before he does, but Meadows is. Let's face it. He's a big. He's a big part of this team. So
they don't make the playoffs without Parker Meadows last year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Carpenter is Carpenter, and I like him. Of course, we'll see. I'm not sure if Hinch doesn't play him against lefties. I don't know if I'll ever let him play against lefties, but we'll see. I'm guardedly optimistic. I still feel like this team is at this weird crossroads where I don't know where they're going to go. They could go. Keep going and keep improving, or they could go back to the old days and lose 85, 90 games. I don't know. I'm not convinced, but I do like the pitching. I really do. I think that, especially with Flaherty, I think it's a nice 1-2 punch at the top of the rotation, one of the best in the league. So I'm okay with that. But the thing that also, as much as I like the pitching, as you know, Al, these bullpen arms can be so mercurial. And they could be. They were very good last year in the pitching chaos that foisted on everybody. But now I don't know. I mean, are they going to be as good this year? I don't know. But I do like the rotation. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, Nick, your thoughts?
I'm sort of meh on the Tigers. I haven't been paying attention to spring training because I just never do. Spring training has its purpose, and it's not to compete and win games.
Right.
It's get the cobwebs out, and just get back to playing condition and so on. So I don't pay attention much to it for that reason. But I'll say that with like every single sport, I never pay attention to the preseason, and even less so trying to interpret how the season could go based on what I see in spring training. So my thinking is the Tigers finish at best second in a division and possibly third. They're not going to be first. They're going to revert back to whoever the hell that team really is, and not that sort of outlier run that they had last year, because it's mostly the same roster. Unless somebody just steps up their game, which I can't predict who that would be. Their pitching, I'm not surprised it would be fairly good. Between Federer and Hinch, they managed to squeeze out a lot out of a pitching staff, whether it's the chaos, they've got Skubal still in there. Him being healthy is really important. But their bats are more or less the same what they had last year, and it's either going to be feast or famine with those guys. Again, unless somebody steps it up that we don't expect to in the regular season, but I don't know who that would be. So we'll see. I'm not that thrilled. Baseball is kind of disappointing me in general, so it's not as much fun to watch for me.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Really, it's the pitching right now. The offense, I am not convinced is going to be better than it was last year, especially with the two guys that are out, and the fact that they're playing guys out of position. Colt Keefe is not a first baseman. They're trying to make him a first baseman, but he's never played first base.
That's another thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you got Gleyber Torres, who is. He's not a good defensive second baseman. Then you got a couple unknowns that you don't know what's going to happen offensively at shortstop between Baez and Sweeney. At this point, I will take the Baez of 2 years ago where he only hit 220, but he still put up 2 or 3 WAR because he hit some home runs and he played decent defense. But that ship may have sailed, but they're still going to see if he can pull it off again this year. And then again, third base, who the hell knows right now? It's a rookie and a guy who clubs left-handed pitching, but who didn't club left-handed pitching for a good portion of the year last year in Ibanez. And Young is a complete unknown, and he's not a third baseman either. He's a second baseman. Odds are Gleyber Torres moves on after this year, and either Colt Keith or Jace Young moves to second base because that's their natural position. They don't have a true third baseman on this team. Verley's not a true third baseman. He's a better outfielder. He's more useful to them as a utility guy, essentially a super utility guy who can play all over the field. I mean, he plays center, both corner positions, play first base, third base, whatever. But now, when you pigeonhole him into a certain position, he's going to lose some value. But him being hurt, who the hell knows right now? So my concern, I love how AJ Hinch handles pitching staff, how he handles the bullpen. My concern is purely the offense. We knew going into the year they were going to need a right-handed power bat. They didn't get one, and the guy who they hope could be that in Spencer Torkelson has yet to prove he can do it consistently, and he actually literally has to rake to get himself on this team this year. And even then, he's not going to be a full-time player; he'll just be a bat off the bench. So, I'm with you, Greg. This is a team that could win 71 games or win 87 games. I just don't know which right now.
Exactly.
So pitching wise, I am fine. I think they even with the bullpens being mercurial, I think they will be fine pitching. But the thing is, my fear is they're going to lose a lot of 3-2 games. They're going to lose a lot of 4-1 games, things like that. Where if they had any offense at all, they would win games that they're going to ultimately lose. That's my fear with this team right now. Again, jury's out. Things can change once the season starts, but yeah, I just don't see this team has an offense. Even when they made that run last year, in the last 2 months of the season, they still had a below league average offense. They don't have guys they still don't have enough guys who can take a walk and can hit for power. In today's league, that's what you have to have. You need 3 true outcome guys, and this team has none right now. They have some potential. It has some potential star players in Parker Meadows and Riley Green, maybe even Colt Keith for that matter. But they are lacking that a couple of solid, middle of the order, steady hitting veterans that all good Tiger teams we've seen have had in the past. They just don't have that right now. So I'm looking forward to the season. I love baseball, but there are so many offensive question marks with this Tigers team. I'm loath to make a prediction right now because I honestly don't know what they're going to do. That's really how I feel. All right, guys. I think with that, it's time to start wrapping things up. So I say it's time for our jerk of the week. Nick, you get to go first.
All right. I don't think this one is like a big deal one, but it kind of drives me crazy every so often. And I'm saying this because I only saw this in the context of trying to tell me how great Cade Cunningham is and how he's on some rarefied air.
Right.
Comparing his stats to that of Nikola Jokic from Denver. And it's like, these are the only 2 players that have these 3 arbitrary stats this high.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing like stupid shit like that all the time. It's like, it's completely arbitrary, meaningless. I don't know what to say or do about it. It's not as though it's some established sort of kind of milestone stat. Like I'm thinking in baseball, you're a 350 hitter or you've reached 3,000 hits, but it's like only 5 players have scored this many points by age 23, and I'm like, so what? What is he going to do between 23 at the time he retires? So that's maybe a little more important at this point. So, and it's just, so it's not any like one person, but it's just this mindset of just because it's a number and you've been able to count something that it's meaningful. It's just, it's a bullshit thing. It's tiresome. I don't care to hear about it. And there's no meaning in it. And as a scientist, I'm pretty anal retentive and critical when someone throws me a number. It's like, is that for real? Does that mean anything? And
right.
These don't. They really, really do not. And they're just stupid shit I don't care about and is a waste of time. And it makes you, and if you're talking about it like it means something, that shows me how dumb you actually are, that you don't even know how dumb you are. So that's my jerk of the week.
I'm with you. The cherry pick stats, they're kind of ridiculous. They really are. Greg, you're up.
I don't know. This is one of those jerks of the week where I'm not really sure what is the jerk. It's not even like who's the jerk. It's like, what is the jerk in this case? And that is these college traditions. And there's 2 sides to these coins. Okay, and this I'm speaking specifically of this Michigan State logo thing at the center court with Michigan. Okay, and there's tons of them. There's tons of these traditions where you plant a flag or you do this or you do that. You step on this. You don't step on that. I know that college people who really used to embrace college sports before it turned into just another multi-billion-dollar business. Yeah. Back in the old days, when it really was, when you think that you were actually watching college students play for their school back in those days.
Right.
That's when a lot of these traditions started. They started when it was kind of like, it was kind of quaint almost that we'd have playing for things like the Little Brown Jug, Michigan versus Minnesota, and all these little goofy little, the Paul Bunyan Award, whatever these goofy little trophies that these teams would play for. Okay. Then it became, well, let's have these little traditions where you plant a flag or you don't plant a flag, whatever the case may be. So I struggle with this Michigan State Michigan thing because on the one hand, it's like it's kind of a goofy thing to do for Michigan State to do the push-ups and the kiss the logo, whatever. But on the other hand, can't you just let them do it? What's the problem if that's what their tradition is? Why can't Michigan just let them do it? Why do teams have to try to do things like in football, plant a flag on a team's logo, or do stuff that they know is going to be incendiary? stuff they know is going to cause backlash, that they know that the other team's not going to just let happen without some sort of pushback. In many cases, physical pushback. Why not just let teams have their little goofy traditions? If they want to do a push-up on center floor and kiss the damn logo, let them. How is that? I know you're salty because you lost the game. I get it, and that's an in-state rival. And I'm not an anti-Michigan guy. I really am not. I'm just saying, in general, why can't schools let other schools have their little traditions, no matter how stupid and silly they are? And why? And then the flip side of it is, why do they have these weird traditions? Push-ups at center court and kissing the logo. I mean, they're just weird. The whole thing's weird. The traditions are weird. The fact that other schools can't just let these schools do their traditions without trying to be assholes about it. I just wish the tradition thing has gotten way out of hand. And it's not just Michigan. It's not a Michigan State thing. It's in general. These goofy traditions, sportsmanship. I just saw a video today of a hockey handshake. These kids were 15 years old. A hockey handshake, just like you would do after a playoff series.
Yeah.
And this one kid just cold cocked this kid in line. Just punched him right in the face. He went down like a box of rocks. Like, what? Where are we going? What? I don't know anything about the context of that. None. All I saw was this video of this peaceful handshake, and all of a sudden this kid cold cocks this other kid, 15 years old.
Right.
I mean, it just, I just, the whole sportsmanship thing in this country has gotten really, really out of hand.
Yeah, that's actually, you could say that about discourse, period.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but you're right. On-field sportsmanship. It feels like that ship has sailed. That's a good call. Both of you guys so far. I wasn't sure where I was going to go. No, I was thought about maybe. You remember Jay Mariotti? Yeah, where he recently said that the reason ESPN was canceling Around the Horn because it got too woke. And this is coming from a guy who lost his job of ESPN because he was up on 3 felony charges for domestic abuse. And he got rightfully called out. A lot of stuff he said, they were anti-Trump. A lot of the people he was talking about, this was going on before Trump was even in office. Jay Mariotti is just a guy trying to keep his name out there. The guy's useless. Then I thought about what's going on in Dallas with Nico Harrison and his trade of why am I drawing blanks? Yes, of Luka Doncic. And talk about an absolute train wreck of roster construction. They had trouble. I think they literally got to the point where they almost couldn't field a team the other night because between injuries and trades and everything else they had going on down there. But I decided to go with Draymond Green because I got on his ass once already. I don't know if you heard what Draymond Green said about Karl Anthony Towns last week. Mm-hmm. He claimed Green on his podcast. This is what he said. He said that Cat missed the game because he was scared of Jimmy Butler. Some say because he took off the game against the Warriors. And the quote was, some would say he didn't play because Jimmy was in the building. They said Cat ain't play because Jimmy came to town. Well, you know why Karl Anthony Towns didn't play? He was at a funeral.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he was at a funeral. And then when Draymond Green was actually confronted about this in a press conference, and the thing is, the only guy who had this came out was Green, so of course then it got into the national media and they started parrying the same thing until the truth came out. And Green was actually confronted about this and questioned to Green, you seen the reaction to your Cat comments that he ducked a game against the Warriors? Were you aware of the circumstances? Draymond, no. Question, he was at a funeral of a family friend. Draymond, oh man. But what I heard was, I said well wishes, but the Draymond Green show will go on. Essentially, then he went on and essentially issued a non-apology apology, like I'm sorry you're offended kind of thing. Yeah, and Draymond Green, this isn't the first time he's done shit. He was on TNT during all the All-Star Game festivities, and he was going on and on about how the players aren't trying hard enough and they don't respect the game anymore. And Charles Barkley said, "Your generations of players are the ones who did this. This has all happened in the last 10, 15 years. This is your guys' fault that players don't care anymore." So my jerk of the week is Draymond Green. One, because he's a head case, and for all the bullshit he's pulled out of court over the years, but for dragging Karl Anthony Towns' name through the mud for no reason at all other than he heard a rumor and then didn't fact check it. Yeah. So my jerk of the week is Draymond Green because he's an ass. Always has been, always will be. And I hope to hell this recent incident is enough to say he does not deserve the bully pulpit of being on a national televised basketball broadcast.
Nice.
I actually agreed with him when he complained about the format of the All-Star game.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm with you. And I'm also glad he never became a Detroit Piston.
Yeah. Yeah, he's one of those guys I would have a very hard time rooting for, to say the very least. All right, guys, I think it's time to wrap it up. So you know what that means, Greg. You get to throw out the who our upcoming guests are and social media and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Eastern Michigan football coach Chris Creighton will be here.
Yes, it's always fun.
Always fun. 2 weeks from tonight on the 24th. Interested to see what he says about the program that he is now, believe it or not, has coached for 11 years. I can't believe it. He's coached for 11 years. And we'll talk about that with him. Follow me on Twitter or X at Greg Eno. Follow me on Blue Sky as well. I'm Greg Eno. I believe on Blue Sky as well. Please subscribe to Out of Bounds via Substack, gregeno.substack.com, and I'll be in your inbox every Monday. I want to thank my lovely wife, Sharon, and thank you, gentlemen, for making Monday night so gosh darn fun.
Oh, and that reminds me about your Substack. You wrote about Tom Gores today, or at least how he's. I forgot to bring it up during a Pistons discussion.
All right. Okay.
Oh, we'll get it. We got another podcast in 2 weeks. We'll discuss it then. So, all right, Nick, feel free to let people know where they can find you online.
Yes. As far as Detroit sports goes, mostly I'm on Twitter at Nick Milanovich, but I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm there a little less active. Under a different handle of Cat Up a Tree. And, but yeah, hit me up on either one of those two platforms. And if you want to chat about Detroit sports, complain about the Wings, praise the Pistons now for the moment, or any other Detroit sports thing, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I say Blue Sky had a bit of a moment today because of the Twitter going. I can't call it X. Twitter going down for quite a while today. Apparently, there was Anonymous was doing their thing and was hacking into Twitter, which, hey, I'm all for it. What the hell? Send everybody to Blue Sky. It's a lot nicer over there. I'll say that much. Not as busy over there either, but it's a lot nicer people there. All right. As always, I appreciate people. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe at the various places you can watch and listen to our little podcast. We are available at all the usual places where podcasts are found. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. We're on Deezer, Radio Public, Ghana. We're also video. We're on YouTube proper, and we are also now simulcasting on Twitch as well. On Twitch, just do a search for the Knee Jerks Podcast. You will find it. And Twitch is a little different. Twitch doesn't keep a long history of previous shows, only like a week or two on Twitch. But if you happen to stumble on us on Twitch, if you get tired of watching people play Grand Theft Auto 5, come watch us on Twitch as well. The homepage, thekneejerks.net. That's where you can find the links to all our social media. You can find the links to Greg's Substack. Anything we talk about link-wise with our guests, you will find that information on thekneejerks.net. And, of course, you can download the MP3 straight from there as well. And I think with that, it's time to get out of here because we got a late start, so we're getting a late ending. So it's time to go home. So until this time, 2 weeks from now, we talk to Eastern Michigan head coach Chris Creighton. This is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Good night, guys.
And Mr. Out of Bounds himself, Greg Eno.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see you in 2 weeks.